What is SQL injection? Don't developers know any better? Years of development have gone by since we've known about this attack, and developers are still vulnerable to it. That's what some people say to me. Hey, why are we still vulnerable? SQL injection is so old. Don't developers know any better? Really? Well, in 2010, it was the #1 attack. Some say in 2011, it's a #1 attack as well. There are charts that show denial of service being #1. So SQL injection, the point is very high up there in attacks. It's not always an issue of a developer knowing any better. You might be dealing with legacy code. There might be a database administrator who writes the code, who happens to write code vulnerable to SQL injection, so you might have only control over your application to help prevent it. And SQL injection is when commands are inserted into the control channel when an attacker breaks out of the data channel. So what is the data channel? What is the control channel? If we look at this example here, we see in our control channel is code that is the query. It's the control of the query. It's what we would think of as the executing part of the query. Select star from users, where username equal, and then our data channel is Mary. So control channel is our code. Our data channel is just the data, Mary. So what an attacker does, rather than putting in something like Mary, the attacker adds on another quote, which closes off that string, a semicolon, which for instance in SQL Server denotes a second batch. We're finishing off that first batch and we're submitting a second one. You can submit a whole bunch of batches to SQL Server at once, just separated by a semicolon. And the next statement after that is to delete from users, which would remove everything in the users table. The -- quote, the -- comments out everything at the end. The final quote that you see is what the developer would have put into the application to close off what was expected to be the original string, Mary. So -- comments out anything after that. Now we are left with two valid commands, the first being a benign command, select star from users where username equals Mary. The second one is very dangerous, delete from users. And it could get executed with no log of this happening. There are lots of variants on this attack. Even if you think that you're not vulnerable to this attack, there might be ways that attackers can break your code. The data that is used in SQL injection that becomes part of the control channel can come from really anywhere. It could be cookies, database, query string, form parameters. It can even come from request headers. Anywhere that data is used in a SQL statement, if that is used incorrectly and not parameterized, then it could be vulnerable to SQL injection. SQL injection can also be the result of various other methods, which we'll look at later on. String truncations, there are ways that security routines can actually cause the holes themselves. SQL injection is very dangerous because once an attacker realizes that the database is vulnerable to SQL injection, the damage they can do is limited only by the permissions of the account attacker is connecting to the database as. In other words, the account that the application is connecting to the database as. If that account happens to have DBO or owner privileges in that database, they can query basically anything. If that account is mapped to a sysadmin user, they can do anything in the database. That account, if it's in a domain admin account, they have permissions to do virtually anything on the domain as well. They can re-enable any disabled security features on the database side. The damage is limited really only by these permissions. There are programs out there to copy entire databases over port 80. Once an attacker's on the system, they can enumerate it. They can scan your whole network. It's very dangerous because it gives them direct access to a system that's running inside of your network.